We got Steve in Hong Kong.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Guys, how you doing?
Good.
I made sure that I woke up early so I could phone you guys.
I'm impressed.
Okay, so yeah, my question is, well, actually, I should probably state my position first. I was an atheist probably for about 20 years of my life, and the last few years, reading a lot of different types of literature and stuff, mainly more Taoist or Buddhist in my viewpoints and the way I think. So my question to you guys is, who am I on with? I'm with you, Matt, and who else?
And Jen.
Jen, hi. How you doing?
Good.
So I guess my question to you guys is, in relations to the questions regarding suffering and death, how was it kind of like taught to you guys when you were growing up as Christians, and then how do you see it as an atheist now?
Well, when I was growing up, it's the standard story that, death entered the world because of the fall. So that was the explanation for, why we have death.
And suffering.
And suffering, yeah. And as far as the suffering thing, the obvious suffering of people, all you had to do was turn on the news and you'd see that, somebody lost their house in a fire or, a hurricane hit or something was happening, people were suffering. And that was always explained that, it was either those people deserved it because, they turned away from God, or, it was a, sort of divine retribution for some other real or imagined crime that they had committed. It was never really a very acceptable answer. And in particular when it seemed like it was just gratuitous, the death of innocent children or something like that. And that was always God works in mysterious ways and you don't know what God's purpose was and all this stuff. And like I said, it was just very unsatisfactory, those explanations. The reality is that sometimes there is no answer. We're humans. We always search for some reason for something to have happened, and sometimes there's just no reason. Things happen.
Not just reason, but intent.
Right.
We tend to try to look for intent in things. So when we see some huge catastrophe like a tsunami or a hurricane that comes in and devastates an area and kills people and completely destroys an economy and makes sure that plenty of other people are going to die in the aftermath from disease or starvation or whatever else, we look at that and say, wow, that's just massive amounts of suffering. Why would that happen? Well, you're already asking the wrong question, because not that why is bad. I mean, you can phrase a why question that would be valid, but when you ask that question, people are looking for a purpose or an intent, and the very question presumes that that's going to be the case. It reminds me of people who would say, if God didn't create the universe, then who did? And by asking who, they're assuming that the answer needs to be who. And the thing I keep harping on is asking the right questions. The question is, there must be some explanation for the existence of the universe. What is that explanation? And that question does not eliminate possibilities. It doesn't eliminate the possibility of a God or divine power doing it, and it doesn't eliminate the possibility of a scientific naturalistic explanation. So when we look at a tsunami, instead of saying why and implying intent or purpose, we really need to understand more about weather and the universe we live in, the practical reality of it, and you can come to understand that, first of all, if this had an intent or purpose behind it, it's vile and malicious. Mm-hmm. And if your God is sending hurricanes and tsunamis to destroy people, then he's just, beyond my ability to fathom why anybody could or worship or revere that for any reason other than fear. Now, you mentioned that you were an atheist, and these ideas of death and suffering somehow changed your view to kind of a more Taoist or whatever view. My thing is that having been a Christian and now I'm an atheist, what changes my mind is evidence. And I can't see anything in the ideas of death and suffering that would lead me to change my position towards any direction, be it Taoist or Christianity or whatever, because there's nothing there. There's no evidence for the benefit of those. So it seems to me that, and I don't know all of your reasons, and I'm happy to have you expound on them, but it seems to me that you're opting for the comfort thing. You're opting for it would just be too sad to live in a world where there wasn't this, and therefore I'm going to go ahead and go for the comforting delusion rather than an evidence-based solution.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could say it's like a security blanket or an illusion, but again, there's no proof for either or, correct?
Well,
the thing about Taoism, it's not really a religion. I mean, if anything, it's more like a way of reasoning life, or there's no real God to worship. It's just the way that I'm thinking.
Steve?
You know, so it's not really like Taoism led me in a different way of thinking, but it's just like, for example, when I was an atheist, I was on stable ground, and it was actually an astronomy class that I took in university that really sealed it for me. That after that lecture, I was dead set sure I was an atheist. That was 20 years ago. In these last few years, I look back, and it seemed like when I was an atheist, I was on stable ground. I mean, we're just atoms, and when we die, that's it.
What's that have? Okay, Steve, I got to stop you because now we're like 3 minutes away from the first thing. You said there's no proof either or. What do you mean by that?
Whether life continues after death or life just ends.
Sure.
Right.
And
what I'm saying is, my position as an atheist before was life just ends, and then
sure,
that's it.
I understand, Steve. But what I'm saying is that once again...
Is that your position too?
No, I'm saying that once again you framed something in a way that's false. By saying either or, that there's no proof that this is true or this is false, you've portrayed it as, for example, theism and or the belief in a God and the belief there is no God. That's not atheism.
Well, okay, then in that respect, in how I saw myself as an atheist was I was pretty sure that there was no God.
Sure.
Or forget God, because God's not even in the equation in my views. It's not even in...
So do you believe in a God?
There's a God or there's a heaven or anything like that.
No,
I am taking the view that there's probably... death is just something like in the time span of a...
Well, you said probably.
Of a nanosecond or something like that, and it's going to be the next stage of something else, which I don't know what it is.
Why?
What evidence? I mean, you said probably. So what evidence did you use to determine that it was probable?
Well, it's okay. Just going back to those scenarios of where you're confronted in a position where you're able to put yourself in a real dire situation, and you are confronting death. Well, what are you thinking as an atheist as those seconds are going by?
How is that an answer to my question? How is that evidence for your position? I was asking. What evidence you had that made you determine.
I don't have evidence for my position. It's the way that my mind will think, like to rationally think it out.
Why? Okay. And why would you believe something that you don't have evidence for?
Well, here. Let me try it this way, like asking you a question.
Sure.
If it's okay. If you're
Since I'm not going to get an answer, I guess I'll answer.
Sorry, what was your answer?
I'm saying if I can't get an answer to the question I ask, sure, go ahead and ask me a question and I'll answer.
Oh, okay. Well, the question is, I mean, like you said, those tsunami, hurricane types of questions, and you see all that suffering and death as a witness to it. But I don't know if you're really able to picture yourself in the situation where you are the person that is suffering.
No, I probably cannot accurately picture myself in that situation. I can come up with the best approximation possible. How is that relevant to anything we're discussing?
If you are able to picture yourself in that situation as an atheist, and let's say death is just right around the corner, in your mind, what are you thinking about?
In my mind, I've actually been in situations like that. Okay.
Yeah. So what are you thinking about?
In my mind, it's I'm going to do everything I can to live another day. That's what's in my mind.
Okay. I think
I'll tell you this.
Or natural, but
Steve,
you are facing death. Yeah.
Steve, I'll tell you this. I'm pretty sure that the people who in those life or death situations spend a lot of time focusing on whether or not there's an afterlife are going to find out really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And so in the atheist mind, or actually in my mind, let's just say in my mind when I was an atheist, I was pretty sure that there was no afterlife.
I am too.
Right?
Yep.
Pretty sure.
You are too, right? You're pretty
sure.
But it's kind of like, so in your mind, you're not thinking about anything supernatural as those seconds go by, right?
Correct.
Correct.
So does that mean you don't like the idea of?
No, it means I
life
don't
after
have
death?
any reason to believe that it's possible, so why waste any time on it?
Well, you have a few seconds to go anyways. If you were not deluded and you still were able to rationalize things in your brain.
Let's say for a split second, I did contemplate the idea that maybe there could have possibly been an afterlife. How in the hell does that provide any evidence for the idea? Saying that at the last moment when somebody is being threatened, that their mind may go to the possibility that they're not going to die is not in any way evidence that they're not going to die.
Right, I agree with that.
So why, back to my original question, why would you believe something for which you have no evidence?
Well, here's what I tried to kind of test myself in my brain. If I don't believe that there's a God,
right?
So
you're still an atheist.
I'm not even going to contemplate anything that is supernatural in those last seconds. But then I was thinking, I don't like the idea. I mean, do you like the? Are you both of you taking the argument that you like the idea that life just stops?
Look, what we like or what we wish would happen has no bearing on what the evidence says actually happens.
Well, no. What I'm saying, I'm putting aside the evidence for this moment because you're
putting aside the evidence across the board. You've just admitted that you believe something because you like it better. I don't work that way. I couldn't possibly work that way. Now, to answer your question about whether or not I have any appeal to it, I would like to live as long as possible. However, the various paradigms about afterlives, most of them I find repugnant. Especially the ones like, for example, in Christianity, where your entire existence here, your 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever years, turns out to be some big cosmic joke, and then the real life starts where you're either rewarded or punished forever. I find that repugnant. Of course I wouldn't want it to be true, because it tells me a number of things about what's actually gone on in reality that are offensive. Are there other ideas of afterlives that I don't find offensive? Sure. But none of it matters. Because no matter how much I might wish it were true, it ain't true. I might wish that I won the lottery, but if I start running around acting like I've won the lottery, I'm going to find myself in a great deal of trouble.
See, you kind of just basically said you don't like the idea. You wish it were true. So what I'm thinking is, in those last few seconds, the fact that you wish that your thoughts of life were not true, and that the fact that you wish they were true, those last few seconds, you would probably dig into your brain and look at the supernatural, wouldn't you?
Well, I don't know for exactly what I do. Go ahead.
I
thought that's what you just said.
Like I said, I've actually been in situations where it was a life or death situation. Okay, and I mean, I was within minutes of dying. And if, well, I'll try not to tell a war story here that's too long.
Okay, no problem.
But essentially what happened was I was flying a helicopter in Germany, had taken off from Coleman Army Airfield, and was cleared on an IFR flight plan to an Air Force base in Western Germany.
Right.
And shortly after departure, we entered the clouds. I was with a friend of mine who's my co-pilot, and he actually had not very much experience on instrument flight rules.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we entered the clouds, he got vertigo. And so he was sitting there wrestling with this, and I don't know if you know much about vertigo, but it's actually like your brain malfunctions. So I was flying, I was making radio calls, I was managing the cockpit, everything by myself for a while. And about the time we leveled off, I had noticed before that we were picking up some ice, which is normally not a problem. By the time we leveled off, I realized that we had picked up a significant amount of ice, and when I did a cross-check, I looked at my engine temperature, and it was in the yellow, which means that the ice was encroaching on the engine inlet and starving the engine for air. Okay. I also noticed that I had picked up about 13 pounds of torque, which means there was over an inch of ice on my rotor blades.
Mm-hmm.
If you get more than half an inch of ice on your rotor blades, you cannot auto-rotate. So if my engines failed because it was starved for air, I would have to enter auto-rotation, but I could not auto-rotate, which meant I was going to be basically a brick.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I had a few minutes to make a decision about what to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And, the fact that I'm still alive tells you that I did not do what my crew chief was doing, which he started praying in the back seat.
Okay.
Fortunately, I didn't need him to do anything for me.
Right.
But I contacted Frankfurt Approach, got us vectored back over to Coleman, and Coleman brought me in on a precision approach. And as we were coming in, the thing that was going through my mind was not, I hope some supernatural entity bails me out of this, was I hope I don't hit the power lines that are on the approach end at Coleman Army Airfield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sort of makes sense. Generally people. The thing is, you are facing death. I agree with your situation. I'm not trying to put anything away from your situation or anything like that. But you weren't even at that mode of thinking, of loved ones or whatever, because that's usually what happens towards the very end. You weren't quite to the very end
everyone.
yet. Does that make sense?
I don't know how much longer we're going to waste on this, Steve. You believe stuff because you like it.
Okay.
You believe stuff because you like it, not because you have evidence.
No,
right?
I agree. There is no evidence. But rationally thinking, I think if you don't like the idea of life ending and just like that, a brain rationally, I would assume, would rationally think of supernatural things.
You have a different definition of rational than I do. And what I like or don't like, is irrelevant.
I agree that
I don't like the fact that I'm broke, but I don't go around acting like I'm not.
I agree that what you're describing does happen. It does happen for some people. I don't agree that it's rational.
And I don't think it's relevant.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about whether or not something is true, and we're also talking about whether or not something is believable, whether or not belief has been justified. And you called to say that you used to be an atheist, but now you've changed your position, and we've already established that it's because you prefer a different view on reality that has no ties to what's actually true or demonstrable.
Well, I would say, that makes sense, but in terms of truth, everyone is, well, not everyone. My wife is definitely not one of a truth seeker, but normally atheist people are generally knowledgeable. They know a bit about everything, whether it be science or any kind of religion or whatever. They know a bit about everything.
I don't think that's true either, but I'll let you keep going.
So when, like in those situations where you are towards the very end, and you are confronting death, I would assume that a rational brain, unless they like the idea that life ends and that's it, that they would probably think of supernatural, whether it be...
Why do you think that's rational? Here, it's really simple. I have a brain that doesn't like the idea that I'm going to die. And when I'm dying, what reason would I have to spend time contemplating? I realize that it does happen. What rational reason would I have to waste time contemplating something that I don't think exists? If I'm rational, wouldn't I spend that time in a way that's more productive? Perhaps thinking
Well,
about
no, there is no
thinking
productive
about the
time
parts
left.
of
You only
life
have
that I
3 seconds
enjoyed,
left.
thinking about the parts of life that I enjoyed, thinking about loved ones, or saying, "Oh wow, I'm actually going to die. Let's see what happens." Hello.
So yeah, I'm here. So the position that you're taking, that you like the idea that life just ends.
No.
We never said
Well,
that. I mean,
To some
No,
extent.
but what I'm saying is,
To some extent,
in
yes.
those final seconds,
To some extent, yes.
I would think it's not just rational, but probably by instinct, a human brain would think about supernatural things,
Okay.
whether it be
Stop,
floating
Steve.
through a wormhole
Steve.
or
No.
going to be reincarnated or
Steve.
going. Yep.
Stop. You have no idea what rational means. You've just equated instinct with rational.
Well, no, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
I was saying rational, really, but
And
I'm trying to paint the picture that I think a brain, if they don't like the idea, that it would automatically probably
we can't keep going over this,
think
Steve.
about supernatural
yeah,
things.
Steve, we can't keep going over this. There's other callers
Okay,
waiting.
all right.
he's saying the same
Okay,
thing over
okay.
and over.
Cool. Thanks a lot for calling,
All right.
though.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah. I agree it happens.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that it's rational. I wanted a rational reason. Of course, I wanted a rational reason to change my beliefs, and all I can get is I like it better. Okay.
Well, and I knew when I told that story, it's like he's going to look at this, he's going to say, "Oh no, but you weren't
quite there.
quite there." It's like, okay.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the guy behind you was.
Yeah.
And instead of me thinking about whether or not I'm hitting power lines, I'd have been saying, "Would you shut the hell up? I'm trying to save our butts."
Yeah, fortunately, I couldn't hear him over the
Yeah, it's
you know,
very good.
the engine noise. So.
Yeah, pray quietly. I'm trying to think here.
Yeah, he wasn't transmitting his prayers. So.
We put prayer closets in the back of helicopters now.